You have no right to be here." That's what the HOA lady screamed as she slammed those violation papers on my table. Like a slap right across my face. Right there in the middle of my family ranch. The ranch we'd owned for 40 whole years. She said I had to leave. Right now. Cold stares from her HOA board backed her up. They thought their new rules could just erase our family history. But they had no idea what was coming. I had a plan that would make them pay for every single step they took. Can you guess when? Everything started to turn around. Let me tell you the whole story. I was out there fixing my fence when I heard it. That angry sound of a fancy BMW racing up my gravel road. Like it was running from the police or something. This white car kicked up. So much dust it could choke a horse. Out stepped Karen Whitfield. She called herself the Queen of Sunset Hills. HOA. Karen got out wearing this black jacket that screamed lawyer. She had this thick binder in her hands, thick enough to stop a bullet. And her face looked like she invented the idea of home values going down. But here's what caught my eye. Her hands were shaking, just a little as she held that binder. I noticed that right away. At 52 years old, I'd learned to read people pretty well. Karen was nervous, but trying to act tough. She walked across my land like she owned it, which was pretty funny considering what was about to happen. Her high heels clicked on the stone path my grandpa built back in 1978, the same year this ranch became our family home. Behind those fancy sunglasses, I could see eyes that had practiced this speech. Probably in the mirror many times. The whole thing felt like bad acting, which made it even more weird. My name is Jake Morrison. This ranch has been in my family for 3 whole generations. After 20 years building houses and roads, I retired early. I wanted to focus on farming and raising cattle the right way. The peaceful life was way better than the corporate world. Especially after that brutal legal fight I had with a developer 10 years back. That experience left me with some trauma and a healthy fear of property fights. Karen stopped about 10 feet from where I was working. She announced herself like she was serving me arrest papers. I broke 23 different HOA rules. My chickens were too loud in the morning. My tractor blocked the shared road when I fed my animals. My barn needed new paint to match the neighborhood. Look. My cows and chickens were like running a business in a home area, and my farming was basically ruining their fancy community. The craziest part was this thing she called a compliance order. It gave me 30 days to follow HOA rules or face a lawsuit. I almost laughed when she said it, but that shake in her voice told me she was dead serious. This woman really believed she could tell me how to use my own land. Land my family owned since before her precious neighborhood was even an idea. I put down my hammer and walked to my truck. I grabbed a folder I kept there for times like this. Inside were copies of my deed and property papers. Legal proof that Morrison Ranch had been here since 1978. Handed her the papers calmly. I explained that her HOA was built around me, not the other way around. Texas law strongly protects people who were here first. She barely looked at the papers before waving them away. That's when Karen said the line that would haunt our whole fight. She looked me dead in the eye. She said laws on paper were one thing, but reality was something totally different. She'd already complained to the city about my animals being in a home neighborhood. And about me running a business without the right permits. If I didn't cooperate, she would make my life so legally complicated. I begged to sell to her favorite developer. Hearing about legal problems brought back bad memories. Memories I'd worked hard to forget. 10 years ago, a different developer tried the same tricks. They dragged me through 18 months of court battles. It almost made me go broke and hurt my mental health. The sleepless nights, huge legal bills, and constant stress took years to get over. I could feel that familiar tightness in my chest as those memories came back. That this time would be different. As Karen climbed back into her BMW, she rolled down the window, one final threat. She told me she had friends in city planning. My property taxes might need reviewing if I kept running a business without permits. The way she said it, casual and confident. This wasn't her first time scaring property owners. Watched her drive away. Dust settled on my boots as I thought about what just happened. This wasn't some neighbor fight about fence lines or barking dogs. Karen Whitfield came prepared for war. She expected me to give up like a cheap tent in the wind. What she didn't know was simple. I'd learned some hard lessons from my last legal battle. This time I wouldn't be fighting alone. 3 weeks later, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at 2 official violation notices from the city, wondering how Karen managed to fast-track complaints that normally take months. She'd been busy flooding city departments with emails and phone calls, using what looked like an impressive network of connections. The first notice was about my chickens. They'd become a public problem overnight. Despite entertaining neighborhood kids for 5 years. The second question whether my cattle operation needed commercial permits. I realized right away I needed professional help. The ghost of my previous legal nightmare was already messing with my sleep. I could feel that familiar worry creeping back. This time, I wasn't going to tough it out alone and hope for the best. I called Sarah Chen, a lawyer who specializes in farm law. She'd helped a friend with water rights issues. I also called Maria Santos, a local PR person who understood how these community battles play out. Sarah showed up the next morning with her thick binder. She had the kind of focused energy that made me glad she was on my side. After looking at my papers, she explained my legal position was pretty strong. But Karen was playing a longer game than simple harassment. Maria had already started watching the Sunset Hills Facebook groups. She was painting a picture of a community being turned against me. The picture that came together was scarier than I first thought. Karen wasn't just some power-hungry HOA president throwing her weight around. She was running a smart campaign to steal my property for a massive development deal. Sarah discovered public records showing talks between the HOA board and Morrison Development Group, a company planning to triple the size of Sunset Hills with luxury homes starting at $800,000. What made this really interesting was my ranch sat right in the middle of their planned expansion. Without my property, their big vision was impossible. That explained Karen's sudden interest in my livestock management. She needed me gone, and she was willing to use city bureaucracy to make it happen. That shake in her hands during our first meeting was starting to make sense. This was personal for her in ways I didn't understand yet. Meanwhile, Karen organized an emergency HOA meeting. To address what she called the ranch problem. Maria went as a concerned resident and reported back. The community was splitting into groups. About 40% supported Karen. They worried my farming might hurt their home values. Another 30% liked having a working ranch in the neighborhood. They found it charming and educational for their kids. The remaining 30% just wanted the drama to stop. Karen was smartly using these divisions. She hosted coffee meetings where she shared carefully chosen photos of my animals during feeding time, making normal ranch activities look messy and dirty. She even started a petition calling for protection of residential character. It was gaining signatures from people who'd never actually visited my ranch. Or seen my operation up close. During one of our planning meetings, I found myself sharing more than I meant to with Sarah. About my previous legal battle, the memories of growing bills, sleepless nights, and constant stress of fighting a well-funded opponent were still raw. I explained how close I came to losing everything. Not just money, But emotionally, Sarah listened without judging. Then she said something that stuck with me. This time, I had a team. Solid legal ground. And growing community support. Maria suggested we needed to start showing the community what my ranch actually offered, instead of letting Karen control the story. She proposed organizing family farm tours. Giving people a chance to see sustainable farming in action, letting their kids interact with the animals. It was a brilliant move. It would turn abstract property value worries into personal experiences with real educational value. The tours were a huge success right away. Kids loved feeding the chickens and learning about sustainable farming. Parents liked the break from suburban routine, the chance to teach their children where food comes from. Facebook group called Support Morrison Ranch started naturally. It reached over 200 members within 2 weeks. People shared photos of families enjoying educational experiences on my property. But Karen wasn't sitting around while I built community support. She contacted the county tax assessor, challenging my farm tax break and demanding a review of my property classification. She also reached out to the fire department, expressing concerns about hay storage and requesting safety inspections. Each move was designed to create bureaucratic headaches, force me to spend time and money defending activities that had been routine for decades. Sarah arrived early Monday morning with coffee and a smile. The smile told me she'd found something interesting in the legal papers. Spread across my kitchen table, she showed me the original easement agreement from 2019. The one that let Sunset Hills developers use part of my property for their main access road and temporary parking during construction. What made this paper particularly valuable was a clause I'd forgotten about. An automatic rent adjustment based on local property values. The original deal was struck when I was feeling neighborly in land was cheap. $500 per month for the developer to build their access road across my property. And use a section near the gate for resident parking. It seemed reasonable at the time. But Sarah pointed out that comparable land rental in our area now commanded $2,500 to $3,000 monthly. The developer had conveniently ignored the adjustment clause, and the 5-year agreement was ending in 2 months. This was the leverage I needed, but I wanted to use it smartly rather than simply demanding more money. Maria suggested we start with some harmless psychological pressure. That would get the community thinking about their dependence on my property. I had some fun with this, installing a large wooden sign at the entrance. It read, "Welcome to Morrison Ranch. Established 1978. With smaller text below, noting current parking, rate market value." The sign was my first small act of rebellion, and it worked perfectly. Residents couldn't help but notice it every time they drove home. Many found it funny rather than threatening. Some even stopped to take photos, which ended up circulating on social media and creating positive conversations about the ranch. Karen, however, was not amused. I could see her BMW slow down every time she passed the sign. Within a week of the sign going up, I sent Karen and the HOA board official notice would not be renewing the access agreement under the current terms if they wanted to continue using my property for their main road and parking area. The fair market rate was $2,500 monthly, effective immediately upon expiration. I also noted that alternative access would require extensive road construction through difficult terrain, estimated by local contractors at over $1.5 million and 18 months of work. Karen's response was predictably dramatic. She called an emergency HOA meeting. She announced they would build their own access road, rather than submit to what she called extortion and monopoly practices. What she failed to mention was simple. The alternative route would require significant environmental permits. Would cost each homeowner thousands in special assessments, and would take nearly 2 years to complete. While residents dealt with construction chaos, the community reaction was swift and not in Karen's favor. Parents with children in school were horrified. The prospect of 18 months of construction chaos. Elderly residents worried about emergency vehicle access. During construction, young professionals calculated the money impact of special assessments on top of their existing HOA fees. The Facebook groups exploded with debates about whether Karen was protecting their interests or creating unnecessary problems. During this period, I decided to expand my community outreach beyond simple farm tours. Maria suggested hosting educational workshops about sustainable farming and renewable energy topics that resonated with the environmentally conscious residents of Sunset Hills. These events drew even larger crowds. They positioned me as a community resource rather than a problem to be solved. One of my workshops focused on renewable energy options for rural properties, which proved particularly popular. I mentioned that our area was ideal for wind energy development. Several companies had approached me about partnership opportunities. This wasn't just theoretical. Austin Green Energy had contacted me months earlier about potential wind farm development, though I hadn't pursued it seriously at the time. Karen was feeling the pressure as community sentiment shifted in my favor. She hired an expensive law firm specializing in property disputes, filed a multi-layered lawsuit claiming nuisance, improper commercial use, and anti-competitive practices. The legal papers were impressive in their complexity, obvious in their intent to bury me in legal costs and delays. The lawsuit triggered my trauma symptoms in ways I hadn't experienced for years. Sleepless nights returned, along with constant worry about growing legal bills and uncertain outcomes. But this time was different, because I had Sarah managing the legal strategy and Maria handling public relations. I wasn't facing this alone. My support team understood exactly what Karen was trying to accomplish. Sarah reviewed the lawsuit and called it largely frivolous, designed more to scare than to win. She filed counter motions challenging jurisdiction and demanding proof of damages, while also preparing our legal offense. Karen's legal assault arrived like a thunderstorm, overwhelming and designed to cause maximum disruption. Her law firm had filed a complex, multi-layered lawsuit, claiming my ranch was a public nuisance, operated as an unauthorized commercial enterprise in a residential zone, and engaged in monopoly practices by controlling the only practical access to Sunset Hills. They demanded an immediate court order to stop my farming activities, force me to honor the original easement agreement forever. The familiar weight of legal papers brought back memories I'd worked years to suppress. 10 years ago, a similar stack of papers had nearly destroyed my mental health and money stability. Found myself waking up at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling and calculating worst-case scenarios. The difference this time was Sarah, who reviewed everything with calm professionalism. She assured me that Karen's legal team was more impressive on paper than in reality. Sarah explained that the lawsuit was primarily a pressure tactic designed to force a quick settlement by threatening expensive court fights. The claims were largely weak since my ranch came before the subdivision. And enjoyed strong legal protections under Texas property law. However, fighting the case would still cost significant money and time, which was exactly what Karen was counting on. While we prepared our legal defense, Maria was doing her own investigation into Karen's background and motivations. What she discovered added crucial context to our conflict. Karen was not simply a power-hungry HOA president. She was a former real estate lawyer who had declared bankruptcy 5 years earlier. After a real estate fraud scheme collapsed. She was also a single mother with significant medical debt from her daughter's ongoing health issues. This information reframed the entire conflict for me. Karen wasn't fighting from a position of strength, but from desperation, which made her more dangerous, but also more predictable. She needed the Morrison development deal to succeed, because she was counting on profits from increased property values to solve her money problems. My ranch wasn't just blocking her vision of neighborhood improvement. It was standing between her and financial survival. Meanwhile, my farm tours were creating unexpected momentum in the community. Parents brought their children to see the animals and learn about sustainable farming, while adults discovered they enjoyed the peaceful break from suburban routine. A local teacher arranged field trips for her environmental science classes, turning my ranch into an educational resource that enhanced rather than hurt neighborhood character. The growing community support was reflected in social media activity. The Support Morrison Ranch Facebook group had grown to over 400 members. Residents shared photos of their children feeding chickens, discussed sustainable living practices, and organized informal gatherings around farming themes. What had started as a property dispute was evolving into a broader conversation about community values and environmental care. Karen attempted to counter this positive momentum by organizing her own community event, a town hall meeting about protecting property values. With a real estate expert explaining how farming activities impact residential markets. She promoted this heavily through official HOA channels, managed to fill the community center with concerned homeowners worried about their investments. The event backfired spectacularly when Karen's expert accidentally undermined her entire argument. Instead of confirming that farms decrease property values, the specialist explained something different. Unique properties like working ranches often increase values due to their character and exclusivity. He cited examples of suburban communities where farm preservation had become a major selling point, attracting buyers willing to pay premiums for rural character within commuting distance of urban centers. Karen's face turned red as her expert effectively argued my case. Several residents asked pointed questions about why the HOA was fighting something that might benefit their property values. The meeting devolved into heated discussions between Karen's supporters and an increasingly vocal group of residents who questioned whether this legal battle was serving anyone's interests except expensive lawyers. Rather than gloating over Karen's public embarrassment, I decided to take the high road, extend an olive branch. Through Maria, I publicly thanked Karen for bringing attention to how working farms can enhance community character, invited her to tour my ranch to see sustainable farming practices firsthand. This gesture was calculated to make me look reasonable, while highlighting Karen's refusal to engage in good faith dialogue. Karen's response was swift and predictable. Feeling humiliated and increasingly desperate, she convinced the HOA board to install barriers, blocking the main access road to my ranch, and hire security guards to prevent any vehicles from entering my property. If I wanted to charge market rates for road access, she declared, I could see how I liked having no access at all. Standing at my gate watching security guards in bright vests block the only practical route to my ranch, I felt a familiar surge of anger. Feed trucks couldn't deliver to my cattle. Veterinary services were being prevented from reaching sick animals. My ability to transport products from my farm was completely cut off. Karen had escalated from legal harassment to what amounted to economic warfare. Sarah arrived at dawn with coffee and an expression that told me our nuclear option was about to detonate. Spread across my kitchen table were papers I hadn't seen since buying the property, including the original 1978 deed with language that would change everything. Hidden in the dense legal text was a permanent easement, clause, granting Morrison Ranch permanent access rights across the entire area that would eventually become Sunset Hills. This easement wasn't just about my current access road. It gave me the legal right of passage across any part of the development area, including routes that would bypass the HOA-controlled entrance entirely. More importantly, the language was broad, enough to cover emergency services, delivery vehicles, and farm operations, meaning Karen's blockade violated both state and federal transportation laws. Immediately filed an emergency court order, while simultaneously notifying the county sheriff that private security was illegally restricting access to private property. Within 4 hours, a deputy arrived and ordered the barriers removed, explaining to Karen that blocking legal easement access was a criminal offense that could result in arrests. I also filed a civil lawsuit, demanding $10,000 per day compensation for each day my property access had been restricted. The legal reversals sent shockwaves through the Sunset Hills community. Within hours of the barriers coming down, my phone was ringing with calls from residents who had no idea about the easement rights. They were horrified that their HOA had potentially exposed them to massive legal liability. An emergency HOA board meeting was called for that evening. Karen found herself explaining to increasingly angry homeowners why she had escalated a manageable dispute into potential bankruptcy. But I wasn't finished with my counterattack. Sarah had discovered that the original development agreement included provisions for alternative access routes, which meant I could legally close the main road. Force residents to use a winding back route that added 2.5 miles to their daily commute. I sent an official notice that the access agreement would terminate in 30 days, unless new terms were negotiated at fair market rates. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Parents calculated that the alternative route would add 30 to 40 minutes to their daily commute, affecting school drop-offs, work schedules, and after-school activities. Elderly residents worried about emergency medical services, navigating the longer route during health crises. Delivery services warned that the alternate route might be considered outside their normal service area, potentially disrupting everything from grocery deliveries to Amazon packages. Grassroots rebellion erupted within the HOA, as residents demanded accountability from Karen and the board. The Support Morrison Ranch Facebook group exploded to over 600 members, while a competing Save Sunset Hills access group emerged. To organize political pressure on HOA leadership. Multiple residents announced plans to run for board positions in the upcoming elections, campaigning specifically on platforms of cooperation rather than confrontation. During this chaos, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. Instead of enjoying Karen's misery or demanding maximum payment for access rights, I called for a community meeting to discuss mutually beneficial solutions. Maria had convinced me that this would position me as a reasonable problem solver, while highlighting Karen's inflexibility and poor judgment. The community meeting drew over 200 residents to the Sunset Hills Clubhouse. Far exceeding the normal attendance for HOA gatherings. I presented a simple proposition: restore the original $500 monthly access fee, in exchange for a 10-year agreement that couldn't be altered by future HOA boards. Plus a formal apology and $25,000 in compensation for the damages caused by the illegal blockade. Before Karen could respond to my proposal, something unexpected happened. A representative from Austin Green Energy stood up in the back of the room, asked permission to address the community. David Martinez explained that his company had been monitoring the situation because they were interested in wind energy development partnerships. Our conflict had highlighted an opportunity that could benefit everyone. Martinez presented preliminary plans for a wind farm that would use a portion of my ranch while providing clean energy to the entire Sunset Hills community. At 30% below current electricity rates. The project would generate revenue for me. While reducing utility costs for every household in the subdivision. Suddenly, our fight wasn't about property rights or access fees. It was about the future energy independence of the entire community. The wind farm revelation transformed our community meeting from a property dispute into an energy planning session. But the real surprise came when Karen finally spoke up from her corner of the room. Instead of attacking the proposal or defending her actions, she did something I hadn't expected. She asked detailed technical questions about regulatory requirements and environmental impact assessments. Her legal background was actually useful for understanding the complexities of renewable energy development. David Martinez from Austin Green Energy explained something important. The project would require significant community coordination and legal documentation. To ensure everyone benefited fairly. The partnership would involve leasing 25 acres of my ranch for wind turbines, while establishing a community energy cooperative that would distribute both power and profits to Sunset Hills residents. My family would retain full ownership of our land, while receiving a 20% revenue share from energy production. After the formal meeting ended, Karen approached me privately. She did something that caught me completely off guard. She apologized. Not a political non-apology designed to save face, but a genuine acknowledgement that her approach had been destructive and counterproductive. She explained that financial stress and fear of losing control had driven her to make increasingly poor decisions, culminating in the illegal blockade that could have resulted in serious legal consequences for the entire community. More importantly, Karen revealed the depth of her crisis. Her daughter Emily wasn't just dealing with routine medical issues. She was managing a chronic condition that required expensive ongoing treatment. And would affect her ability to attend college. Karen had convinced herself that the Morrison development deal was her family's only path to financial stability, which explained her willingness to use increasingly aggressive tactics. I found myself in the strange position of feeling sympathy. For someone who had been trying to destroy my livelihood for months. Karen wasn't an evil person. She was a desperate mother who had made bad choices under pressure. The realization changed my perspective on our entire conflict and opened possibilities I hadn't considered before. During our conversation, Karen mentioned that Emily was interested in agricultural engineering and sustainable farming practices. This led to an idea that surprised both of us. What if Emily could participate in an internship program at my ranch during her summer break from college? It would give her practical experience in sustainable farming, while allowing Karen to see firsthand what my operation involved. The next few weeks brought rapid changes to our community dynamics. Karen resigned as HOA president, but volunteered to help coordinate the wind farm development process. Using her legal background constructively rather than destructively. A new HOA board was elected with a mandate for cooperation and community building. Rather than confrontation and control. The access road dispute was resolved with my original terms, providing stable funding for ranch operations while ensuring permanent community access. Emily arrived for her internship 3 weeks later. Her enthusiasm for sustainable farming was immediately apparent. She had been studying environmental engineering at Texas A&M, was fascinated by the intersection of renewable energy and farming practices. Having her on the ranch gave Karen regular reasons to visit, transforming our relationship from adversarial to collaborative. The wind farm project moved forward with surprising speed. Once the community was unified behind it, Austin. Green Energy had been looking for exactly this kind of cooperative development model, where residents shared in both decision-making and profits. The environmental review process was streamlined because of strong community support. Construction began 6 months after our first community meeting. Karen's transformation was remarkable to witness. Released from the pressure of fighting everyone around her, she became an effective advocate for community interests, a valuable liaison between residents and the energy company. Her legal expertise proved invaluable in reviewing contracts, ensuring fair terms for everyone involved. Most surprisingly, Karen and I developed what could only be described as a friendship. Our shared experience of high-stakes conflict followed by collaborative success created a bond that neither of us had anticipated. 6 months after the first wind turbines began spinning above my pastures, Sunset Hills had become something none of us could have imagined when this whole mess started. The community that had been divided by property disputes and legal threats was now united around shared prosperity and environmental stewardship. Local news outlets featured our story as a model for how rural and suburban communities could work together on renewable energy development. My ranch was thriving in ways that went far beyond the wind farm revenue. The agritourism program had attracted visitors from across the region, drawn by the unique combination of working agriculture and renewable energy education. School groups came for field trips. Families visited on weekends. Emily had developed a social media presence that showcased sustainable farming practices to thousands of followers. Karen's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of our story. She had gone from neighborhood villain to community coordinator, using her legal skills to help other residents navigate property improvements and HOA issues. Her daughter Emily had changed her major to agricultural engineering, was already planning to return for another summer internship, with serious discussions about eventually taking over ranch operations. As I approached retirement, the financial benefits of our wind farm partnership exceeded everyone's expectations. Utility bills had dropped by an average of 35% for Sunset Hills residents, while the community fund generated by profit sharing was supporting college scholarships, playground improvements, and a community garden project. 3. Other suburban communities had reached out asking for advice on replicating our model. Emily's summer internship had evolved into something more significant than either Karen or I had anticipated. She was conducting research on integrated renewable energy and agriculture systems for her senior thesis, using my ranch as a living laboratory. Her work was attracting attention from university researchers, potentially positioning our operation as a demonstration site for sustainable farming practices. One evening, as I was checking on the cattle, I noticed Karen and Emily working together in the community garden, planning next season's plantings and discussing water conservation techniques. The sight of them collaborating peacefully, where angry confrontations had once taken place, reminded me how dramatically our relationships had evolved from conflict to cooperation. The wind farm had also attracted attention from renewable energy researchers, studying community-based development models. A team from the University of Texas was documenting our process as a case study in collaborative resource management, particularly interested in how we had transformed property disputes into shared economic benefits. Karen had also found unexpected personal growth through our collaboration. She confided that the experience had taught her the difference between controlling situations and influencing them positively, instead of trying to force outcomes through confrontation. She had learned to build consensus around shared benefits and common goals. The broader impact of our story extended beyond Sunset Hills, as other communities reached out for guidance on resolving their own property disputes and renewable energy planning. Maria had parlayed her work on our project into a consulting business, helping communities navigate similar challenges. while Sarah was being sought out by other agricultural lawyers dealing with suburban encroachment issues. Looking back on the entire experience, I realized something important. Karen's initial attempt to force me off my ranch had inadvertently created opportunities none of us could have imagined. Her aggressive tactics had unified the community against her. But the wind farm proposal had given everyone a chance to redirect that energy toward positive collaboration rather than continued conflict. As I write this story, the wind turbines are spinning above cattle that graze on land my grandfather cleared with his own hands, generating clean energy for families who were once my adversaries, but are now my partners. Karen stops by regularly to discuss community projects and check on Emily's research. We often laugh about how differently things could have turned out if we had all been too stubborn to find common ground. If you found yourself in a similar situation, would you have chosen confrontation or collaboration? What would you have done differently? Share your own stories about community conflicts and creative solutions in the comments below. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, but building something better together that makes your former enemies irrelevant. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of turning conflict into community success.